Okay. All right. So we're continuing our reading on chapter 38, Indifference and Separation. This is on page 351 of the PDF and page 313 of the book. So we are here with us here in Bhaktiville, our Bhakta Mimulus, our tech person, Bhakta Greece, and our friend Prabhu Kandita. So before I get started, first let me offer my obeisances. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I also offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone. They are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. All right, chapter 38, Indifference and Separation. So I just want to say before I get started that I usually check the references that are in the text just so that I can read the purports and understand a little more. And oftentimes I find discrepancies that the verse that's cited in the text is not the correct verse. So I found quite a few of those tonight. So I will just note those as I'm reading. All right. The great devotee Uddhava once wrote a letter to Krishna. My dear Krishna, I have just finished the study of all kinds of philosophical books and Vedic verses about the goal of life, and so now I have a little reputation for my studies. But still, in spite of my reputation, my knowledge is condemned, because although enjoying the effulgence of Vedic knowledge, I could not appreciate the effulgence emanating from the nails of your toes. Therefore, the sooner my pride and Vedic knowledge are finished, the better it will be. End quote. This is an example of indifference. Another devotee very anxiously expressed himself thusly, quote, my mind is very flickering, so I cannot concentrate it upon your lotus feet. And seeing this inefficiency in myself, I become ashamed, and the whole night I am unable to sleep because I am exasperated by my great inability. End quote. In the Krishna Karnamrita, Bilvamangala Thakur has explained his restlessness as follows, quote, my dear Lord, your naughtiness in boyhood is the most wonderful thing in the three worlds, and you yourself know what this naughtiness is. As such, you can very easily understand my flickering mind. This is known to you and myself. Therefore, I am simply yearning to know how I can fix my mind on your lotus feet. End quote. Another devotee expressed his impudency by saying, quote, my dear Lord, without considering my lowly position, I must confess to you that my eyes are just like black wasps, desiring to hover at your lotus feet. End quote. In the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th chapter, and this should be 37th verse, the great sage Narada informs Maharaj Yudhishthir about Prahlad Maharaj, who was a devotee from the very beginning of his life. The proof of Prahlad's natural devotion is that even when he was a small child, he did not play with his playmates, but was always eager to preach the glories of the Lord. Instead of joining in their sport of acrobatic feats, he remained as an inactive child because he was always in trance, meditating on Krishna. As such, there was no possibility of his being touched by the external world. The following statement is about a Brahmana devotee. Quote, this Brahmana is very expert in all kinds of activities, but I do not know why he is looking up without moving his eyes. It appears that his body is fixed motionless, just like a doll's. In this condition, I can guess that he has been captivated by the transcendental beauty of that expert flute player, Sri Krishna, and being attached to him, he is simply staring at the black cloud, remembering the bodily hue of Sri Krishna. End quote. This is an example of how a devotee can become inert due to ecstatic love. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 4th chapter, and that should be the 40th verse, excuse me, Prahlad Maharaj says that even in his childhood, when he was loudly speaking the glories of the Lord, he used to dance just like a shameless madman, and sometimes, being fully absorbed in thought on the pastimes of the Lord, he used to imitate such pastimes. This is an instance of a devotee's being almost like a madman. Similarly, it is said that the great sage Narada was so ecstatically in love with Krishna that he would sometimes dance naked, and sometimes his whole body would become stunned. Sometimes he would laugh very loudly. Sometimes he would cry very loudly. Sometimes he would remain silent, and sometimes he would appear to be suffering from some disease, although he had no disease. This is another instance of becoming like a madman in the ecstasy of devotion. In the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya, it is stated that when Prahlad Maharaj was thinking himself unfit to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he immersed himself in great distress in an ocean of unhappiness. As such, he used to shed tears and lie down on the floor as though unconscious. The students of a great devotee once talked amongst themselves in this way, quote, "My dear God brothers, our spiritual master, after seeing seeing the lotus feet of the Lord, has thrown himself into the fire of lamentation. And because of this fire, the water of his life has almost dried away. Let us now pour the nectar of the holy name through his ears, and by so doing, the swan of his life may again show signs of life." When Lord Krishna went to the city of Shonitapur to fight with Bali's son Bana and cut off all his hands, Uddhava, being separated from Krishna and thinking of his fight, was almost completely stunned into unconsciousness. When a devotee is fully in love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there may be the following symptoms due to his feelings of separation from the Lord: feverish condition of the body, withering of the body, lack of sleep, non attachment, inertness, appearing diseased, madness, unconsciousness, and sometimes death. As far as the feverish condition of the body is concerned, Uddhava once told Narada, quote, "My dear great sage, the lotus flower that is a friend of the sun may be a cause of distress for us, and the fire in the ocean may cause us some burning sensation. And the Indivara, the friend of a demon, may distress us in various ways. We do not mind, but the most regrettable factor is that all of them remind us of Krishna, and this is giving us too much distress." End quote. This is an instance of the feverish condition which is due to being separated from Krishna. I was curious about this as I was reading this, the fire in the ocean. I'd never heard that phrase before. And I found one instance where Srila Prabhupada uh, quotes that, or uh, yeah, he says, "Fire exists within the depths of the ocean to produce wealth, and fire is also present in the abdomen to digest food and produce various secretions for the maintenance of the body. May that supremely powerful personality of Godhead be pleased with us." That's Srimad Bhagavatam 8:5-35, if you wanted to look at that. But apparently there are other stories about there being fire in the ocean, which I had never heard of before, which is not so unusual. There are plenty of stuff I haven't heard of before. All right, so moving on. Oh, there's some discussion in chat. Bactomimulus asks a volcano. Could be. Greece asks stomach acid. Yes, that's the fire of digestion. Um, I can't find. I did a little searching online, and there are stories about fire in the water, fire in the ocean, but nothing that I could find other than that verse in the Bhagavatam. But if you want to make it homework, I'm always good for that one. All right. Greece says maybe there could be underwater volcanoes. Yes, could be. But there's a pastime that goes with that. There's a pastime that goes with that. All right. Some of the devotees who went to see Krishna at Dwarka and were detained at the door said, quote, "My dear Krishna, O friend of the Pandus, as the swan loves to dive into the water amongst the lily flowers and would die if he were taken from the water, so we only wish to be with you. Our limbs are being shrunken and faded because you have been taken away from us." End quote. The king of Bahula, although very comfortably situated in his palace, began to think the nights very long and distressing because of his separation from Krishna. King Yudhishthir once said, quote, "Krishna, the chariot driver of Arjuna, is the only relative of mine within the three worlds. Therefore, my mind is becoming maddened day and night with separation from his lotus feet, and I do not know how to situate myself or where I shall go to attain any steadiness of mind." End quote. This is another example of lack of sleep. Some of the cowherd friends of Krishna said, quote, "My dear Krishna, O enemy of the Mura demon, just think of your personal servant Raktaka. Simply because he saw a peacock feather, he is now closing his eyes and is no longer attentive to pasturing the cows. Rather, he has left them in a faraway pasture and has not even bothered to use his stick to control them." End quote. This is an instance of mental imbalance due to separation from Krishna. Greece says, "I always make sure to go to sleep so I don't go mad or crazy." Well, just think of this peacock feather at the same time and you'll be good to go. When Lord Krishna went to the capital of King Yudhishthir, Uddhava was so afflicted by the fire of separation from Sri Krishna that the perspiring water from his inflamed body and the tears from his eyes poured from him, and in this way he became completely stunned. When Sri Krishna left the city of Dwarka to seek out the Shamantaka jewel, he was late returning home. Uddhava became so afflicted that the symptoms of disease became manifest on his body. Actually, due to his excessive ecstatic love for Krishna, Uddhava became known in Dwarka as crazy. To his great fortune, on that day, Uddhava's reputation as a crazy fellow was firmly established. Uddhava's craziness was practically proved when he went to Rivataka Hill to minutely observe the congested black clouds. In his disturbed condition, he began to pray to these clouds, and he expressed his jubilation by bowing down before them. Reese says, "I have a tarot card with a peacock, but I can show you the texture of the end class." Okay, cool. Uddhava informed Krishna, quote, "My dear leader of the Yadu dynasty, your servants in Vrindavan cannot sleep at night thinking of you. So now they are all lying down on the bank of the Yamuna, almost paralyzed, and it appears that they are almost dead because their breathing is very slow." End quote. This is an instance of becoming unconscious due to separation from Krishna. Krishna was once informed, quote, "You are the life and soul of all the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So because you have left Vrindavan, all of the servitors of your lotus feet there are suffering. It is as if the lakes filled with lotus flowers have dried up from the scorching heat of separation from you. End quote. In the example given here, the inhabitants of Vrindavan are compared to lakes filled with lotus flowers. Because of the scorching heat of separation from Krishna, the lakes, along with the lotus flowers of their lives, are being burned up. And the swans in the lakes, who are compared to the vitality of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, are no longer desiring to live in that lake. In other words, because of the scorching heat, the swans are leaving the lakes. This metaphor is used to describe the condition of the devotees separated from Krishna. Oh, here we go, on to another chapter. Chapter 39, Ways of Meeting Krishna. When Krishna and his devotees meet, it is technically called yoga, or linking up with the Lord. So when I was at the university, they would say yoga. The cognate of yoga in English was yoke. So here Prabhupada confirms linking up with the Lord. Such meetings between Krishna and his devotees can be divided into three classes, namely perfection, satisfaction, and steadiness. When the devotee meets with Krishna in great eagerness, that state of meeting is called perfection. In the Krishna Karnamrita, Bilva Mangala Thakur describes how Krishna meets his devotee with peacock feather on his head, with Marakata jewels on his chest, with his ever enchanting smile, his restless eyes, and his very delicate body. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 38th chapter, 31st verse, Shukadeva Goswami tells Maharaj Parikshit, quote, "My dear king, as soon as Akrura, the chariot driver, saw Lord Krishna and his elder brother Balaram in Vrindavan, he immediately got down from the chariot and, being greatly afflicted by affection for the transcendental Lord, fell down upon his lotus feet to offer respectful obeisances." End quote. These are some of the instances of perfectional meeting with Krishna. When a devotee meets Krishna after long separation, it is called satisfaction. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th chapter, 9th verse, it is stated that when Lord Krishna returned to his capital, Dwarka, the inhabitants began to say, quote, "My dear Lord, if you remain in foreign countries for so long, we shall certainly be bereft of seeing your smiling face. And observing your face, we, your eternal servitors, become greatly satisfied. All the anxieties of our existence are immediately mitigated. If we cannot see you because you are long absent from Dwarka, then it will be impossible for us to live any more." End quote. This is an instance of satisfaction in meeting Krishna after long separation. Krishna's personal servant Daruka, seeing Krishna at the door of Dwarka, forgot to offer him respects with folded hands. When a devotee is ultimately situated in association with Krishna, his position is called steadiness in devotional service. This steady position in devotional service is explained in the book known as Hamsaduta. It is described there how Akrura was considered by the gopis to be terror personified, would talk with Krishna about the activities of the Kuru dynasty. A similar steady position was held by Uddhava, the disciple of Brihaspati. He would always massage the lotus feet of Krishna while kneeling down on the ground before him. So I just wanted to take note about Akrura here, where he's considered by the gopis to be terror personified. Akrura is Krishna's uncle, and he worked for Kamsa, and Kamsa tasked him with going to Vrindavan to bring Krishna and Balaram back to Mathura. And so the gopis are not real happy with Akrura because of that. So they see him as terror personified. Back to the text. When a devotee is engaged in the service of the Lord, it is called the attainment of yoga. The English equivalent to the word yoga is linking up. So, actually, linking up with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, begins when the devotee renders service unto him. Devotees situated in the transcendental rasa of servitorship render their particular service whenever there is an opportunity. Sometimes they sit down in front of Krishna to receive orders. Some persons are reluctant to accept this level of devotional service as actual bhakti yoga, and in some of the Puranas also, this servitorship and devotional service to Krishna is not accepted as the actual bhakti yoga system. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it has been clearly indicated that the servitor relationship with Krishna is the actual beginning of yoga realization. In the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, third chapter, and that would be the 32nd verse, it is stated that when devotees are engaged in the discharge of bhakti yoga, sometimes they cry from thinking of Krishna, sometimes they laugh, sometimes they become jubilant, and sometimes they talk in very uncommon ways. Sometimes they dance, sometimes they sing, sometimes they are actually engaged in the service of the Lord, and sometimes they sit down silently as if absorbed in trance. Similarly, in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 28, just as an aside, there is no chapter 28 in the 7th canto. I couldn't find a reference for this next quote, but I'm sure it's somewhere there in the 7th canto, because the 7th canto is all about Prahlad Maharaj and Nrsimhadev, that whole pastime. So Prahlad Maharaj says to his friends, quote, "My dear friends, as soon as pure devotees of Lord Krishna hear of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, who is the eternal reservoir of pastimes, or hear about his transcendental qualities, they become overpowered with jubilation. Ecstatic symptoms are manifested in their bodies. They shed tears, talk falteringly, glorify the Lord in a loud voice, and chant and dance in ecstasy. These ecstasies are always there, but sometimes they overcome all limits, and the symptoms become manifest to all." End quote. In the process of surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are 6 items. This is a great list. To accept everything which is favorable for devotional service, to reject everything which is unfavorable for devotional service, to believe that Krishna will always give protection, to identify oneself with Krishna's devotees, to always feel inability without the help of Krishna, and to always think oneself inferior to Krishna, even though one may have full capacity to perform something on his own. When one is substantially convinced that he is always protected by Krishna in all circumstances, that feeling is called reverential devotion. Reverential devotion is executed in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his other protected devotees. When Krishna was residing in Dwarka, some of the elderly members of the Yadu family would occasionally put some important matter before him. At such a time, Krishna would carefully give attention to those matters, and if there were some humorous topics mentioned, Krishna would immediately respond with smiling face. Sometimes when Krishna was executing his duties in the assembly known as Sudharma, he would ask the elderly members for good advice. By such activities, he is manifest as the supreme spiritual master, the supreme executive head, the superior intelligence, the supreme power, protector, and maintainer. And I think we'll stop there because the next chapter is a little long. So, great stuff. That was good stuff. I love that list of 7. I think I'm going to write that down on a piece of paper and put it up on the wall. That's a good thing to try and remember. Any questions or comments?
Drug, they fell pretty hard because the ecstasy of being with linking with Krishna must be pretty intense if they fell so hard back to I don't want to live anymore and reality sucks.
Right, right. Well, that is the dynamic, the being with Krishna and in separation with Krishna, meeting and separation, meeting and separation. Those are both very important um, relationships that continue back and forth. So, all right. Thank you very much for coming and letting me read. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.